Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, June the 2nd, 2025. As always, I want to talk about the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is, Monday, June the 2nd. But I also want to look at the third house. I've been thinking about the third house over the last couple of days, and what does it mean, and why the third house. Oh well, on Saturday, I was in a car. I was a passenger in a car, and the car broke down. And I'd been thinking about cars, all that day before it broke down, and I was thinking, oh, maybe Jupiter's moving into my third house. Certainly, Jupiter is moving into my third house using a Placidus house system. And so, with Jupiter starting to move into my third house, yeah, third house is quite important to me at the moment. And I do have Venus in Cancer in the third house. So, yeah, I want to talk about the third house, what it means, what it's all about, look at some people who've got planets in the third house. And, I don't talk much about houses. I tend to focus more on signs and aspects, and occasionally people comment, but I perhaps don't refer to houses as much as I should. So I just want to look at just one house, the third house, and what it means. But before I look at the third house, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which it's Monday, June 2nd, 2025. So here's my chart, but I don't want to talk about my chart for the moment. I want to talk about the chart for today, set for noon, June 2nd, 2025, which is a Monday. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So here is the picture for noon. And you can see that the moon is in 6 degrees Virgo. In fact, the moon moves into Virgo London time at 4 in the morning. So, for most of us, the moon is going to be pretty much in Virgo, all day long. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then the moon might not move into Virgo until this afternoon. But I think we can regard that moon in Virgo as being a defining feature of the day. And we can say the usual things about Moon in Virgo. There is a sensitivity there, a sensitivity to what is around us, to what we're in touch with and what we might be consuming. Moon in Virgo can, for example, be quite sensitive to pollutants, bad food, chemicals. And so, for all of us, regardless of our sign, I think we want to have a healthy day, and a day where we know what we're consuming and we know what we're breathing in. And but that might mean that we have to pay a certain amount of attention to detail. Now, the moon in Virgo is not really making any aspects. We are approaching a first quarter moon. So we had the new moon on, when was it? I think it was in May the 28th, 27th, something like that. So, we've had that. When was that? Just a reminder, when was that new moon? So we had the new moon on, we had a new moon on May the 27th. And so it is the first quarter moon coming up. And so, with a first quarter moon, and this is arguably, we're approaching the best part of the lunar cycle. It's, early lunar cycle, moon is waxing, but we're starting to see, the first signs that something is happening. We're beginning to get an idea about what this lunar cycle is all about. And we've got Sun in Gemini, Moon in Virgo. So, Sun in Gemini, Moon in Virgo. Well, both of them are ruled by Mercury, but Sun in Gemini might be the initial idea. And then, Moon in Virgo is about what we actually need to do to put this idea into practice. Moon is in an earth sign. So I think that's quite positive, the fact that we are in a sort of first quarter moon stage. It is a time to get moving. And, aside from that, there really isn't much else going on. The Sun is quintile Saturn. Sun And Saturn, you can see that Sun and Saturn are exactly 72 degrees apart. That's easy to see. Saturn is at 0 degrees Aries. 60 degrees takes us to 0 degrees Gemini. Then you add another 12 degrees to 12 degrees Gemini. So that's 72 degrees, 1/5 of a circle. And so Sun, quintile Saturn is actually about self-discipline. That's what we aspire to. That's what we even fantasize about. We all fantasize about discipline. But sometimes, if one is surrounded by chaos and one can't get anything together, or one has this idea about the way things could be, if I could just sort everything out, if I could just get myself together, everything would be fine, but I can't get myself together. Well, don't give up with Sun, quintile Saturn. There's always a way. And so, there's a possibility of creating order out of chaos. It can happen. And that order starts in your mind. And I know that there is a sort of a interrelationship between one's mind and one's environment. Maybe one needs to have an ordered environment in order to have an ordered mind. Or do you need to have an ordered mind? Where do you start? And so that is a problem. And perhaps with the Sun, quintile Saturn, we should start with our own mind, start with our own will about what we can do. We have a will to create some order here, and with Sun, quintile Saturn, I think that is something that we can do. Now, that's it. There isn't much else to talk about, and Venus is still making a conjunction to Chiron. I didn't actually talk about the Venus conjunct Chiron. That was a bit of an omission. But as it's a new week, that Venus Chiron is still there, and Venus conjunct Chiron could be about sympathy, feeling other people's suffering, the suffering of people we meet. Even if we don't know them, we might feel it. But also, Venus conjunct Chiron, it could have other dimensions. Chiron is the maverick, and so Venus can be about taste. And Venus in Aries is not the most tasteful placement for Aries, for Venus. Don't worry, Venus is going to leave Aries soon. By the end of next week, it'll be in Taurus. By the end of the week, it'll be in Taurus. And with Venus conjunct Chiron, we might want to do things differently, and we might have ideas about what looks good, which might be somewhat unusual. And indeed, it may also be about who we hang out with. We might feel that we want to talk to people or be with people who aren't the usual crowd, who are rather different. And we might even want to make a statement by the people we associate with that conjunction between Venus and Chiron. And that's pretty much all there is to be said. Don't forget, Venus is moving through the last degrees of Aries. It really is about to move into Taurus, and that's something that we do need to start to prepare for. So turning to the picture for Australia and New Zealand, so at noon in sort of Sydney time, which is representative of Australasia, the moon is actually at 29 Leo. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, certainly the first half of the day, the moon is in Leo. And so there is a bit of a difference in terms of how today is experienced compared to, say, if you're in the Americas. And the moon in late Leo is making a sextile to Jupiter. And that moon sextile Jupiter, I don't think you're going to feel it in the Americas, unless you're up very, very early. Even then, I think you might miss it. But if you're in Australia or New Zealand, do take advantage of it. And it, may be a chance to make something work, or you can be enthusiastic about something. And try to work with that energy. But you will have to get up early. If you leave it till this afternoon, that moon sextile Jupiter will be starting to weaken. So so that's the picture in Australia and New Zealand. There is a bit of a difference there, and it is more of a moon in Leo day. And then there is the heliocentric view, and this is for today, June 2nd, 2025, and the Mars Saturn opposition it's still there, but it is beginning to weaken. Though notice that Mars is making a trine to Uranus. In fact, we've got a grand trine, and that is possibly quite an important event. So you don't think geocentrically there is a grand trine, but heliocentrically we've got Venus trine Mars trine Uranus, and the question is, what does that mean? It's tempting to be entirely positive about that grand trine. It's about just things happening, Venus and Mars, relationships, excitement in relationships, and that is all possible. And new meetings, new people, new events. So that's great. But it is a heliocentric chart, and when you've got an aspect like that, it's absolutely possible that it does have an event. It does represent an event which is unusual. It could be spectacular. And does that mean it's going to be good? No, it doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Although, as far as the Earth is concerned, the Earth is not directly involved with this, perhaps, but you could say that the Earth is involved in a micro aspect involving Uranus and Mars and perhaps Pluto as well, because you're dealing with a 15-degree series. So if we, for example, were to take what would that be, 15 degrees? So 15-degree series, that's a 24th of a circle. So if we took the 24th harmonic, I know this is getting really obscure, the 24th harmonic of a heliocentric chart, but let's see what happens. So the 24th harmonic of a heliocentric chart. So remember Earth, Uranus, that grand trine, and how it links to the Earth. So if we take the 24th harmonic, you can see that then the Earth and Mars and Venus and Uranus are all making a conjunction on the 24th harmonic. In fact, it might be more useful to actually look at the 12th harmonic, just so that some of those conjunctions will become, oppositions, but the orbs will be tighter. So let me look at the 12th harmonic to just show you what I mean, and then we go to the. So we'll use the 12th harmonic. So there is. There's a 12th harmonic. So you've got 12th harmonic conjunction between Venus, Mars, and Uranus. These are the planets that are in that are making a grand trine, because a 12th harmonic will show a grand trine as those planets as a conjunction, and then you've got the Earth making an opposition to Mars, and then making an opposition to Uranus. So from a harmonic viewpoint, you could say that this heliocentric chart is actually quite powerful, and the Earth is actually brought into the grand trine using these minor aspects, and that may say something about what's happening today. Monday, maybe quite a drama-filled day. With drama, I think there are supposed to be peace talks, aren't there, or ceasefire talks or whatever between Russia and Ukraine in Istanbul again. I think it's Monday, and of course over the weekend Ukraine has there've been a lot of terrorist actions in Russia committed by the Ukrainians. A couple of bridges blown up, and that's not a good environment to have these peace talks. And of course, one's wondering what if anything is Russia's reaction going to be, and what their response is going to be. And so, with all this stuff happening heliocentrically, I think we should be looking at Ukraine and looking at these supposed talks. I mean, of course, these talks might not happen. These talks are supposed to be happening. I think it's on the Monday in Istanbul, but it may not be about Ukraine. It may be about some other part of the world. So I think overall, actually, this heliocentric grand trine, it looks fun, but it may be not quite as positive as it looks, and it may actually be quite violent. So there's a lot going on heliocentrically, and so let me now look at things from the viewpoint of the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, June the 2nd, 2025, a day when, in fact, in terms of exact geocentric aspects, there is actually very little going on. So let's get going. So these are my forecasts for today, Monday, June 2nd, 2025, for the 12 signs. Aries, you have the moon now moving into Virgo, and that's what it does. It's not really doing anything else. And so, with the moon in Virgo, Aries, you might feel that it's a day when certain things need to be sorted out. They've been sort of developing for some time, and you may have had some great ideas, but now there is a question of where exactly is it going. And if you are just plain optimistic and you believe that everything is going to work itself out of its own accord, then you might be wrong. You might be over optimistic, and actually if you really want to be able to see things through, then I think that it's going to be very important that you put in the work, and it's probably not the kind of work that you're really going to want to do. It just could feel that it's something incredibly tedious, but it probably is worth it. So that might be one way of looking at the day. Now, moon moving into Virgo may say something about the way you feel, and you may not feel 100% great. You could feel better, and if you're feeling a bit under the weather, you should perhaps be asking yourself, what should you do about it? Of course, if you've got some serious ailment, you should go see a doctor. But what I'm saying that anything bad is going to happen on a physical level. I'm just sort of looking at health and well-being here, and it may be a time, Aries, where the things you eat and drink and consume are going to be more important than usual, and also what you breathe in. And so you need ideally to have a wholesome and healthy environment, and you need to know what's going on, and you need to be able to define things. So if you are eating something, for example, ask yourself, what exactly are you eating? And I know that the typical Aries just likes to just do it. Let's just go and eat. Let's not worry about the details. But it would be a good idea to think about ingredients and labels, because there may be something, and you read it and you think, what is this? What is this chemical? What is it? What does it do? And you read about this chemical, and then you think, oh, well, hold on, this chemical is not necessarily particularly good. And it's not just what you eat, it's what you breathe in. You can breathe in all sorts of stuff, and you have a right to clean, fresh air. And if you're not breathing in clean, fresh air, well, then perhaps you should do something about it. Now, I did look at the heliocentric view, and I pointed out that there was a grand trine, Venus and what was it? Venus and Mars and Uranus. Just remind you of that. So there was Mars and Venus and Uranus. They're making a grand trine, and because Mars is involved in that grand trine, I think that might affect you, and it could actually be quite positive. It might be motivating. Now, it's important, by the way, that you get everything right, that you do things in the right order. It's not a day for being crazy. But once you've got everything sorted out, once you're on the right track, then that heliocentric grand trine could actually really work in your favor. And in your own way, you can create big changes. And it just may be that the things you're trying to organize, the things you're trying to sort out, can lead to big changes if you just if you're able to see it through. So that grand trine could actually work for you. And Venus trine Mars in that grand trine. Now Venus is actually trine Mars geocentrically, but that Venus trine Mars is starting to wane. It's now 5 degrees apart, but heliocentrically it's exact. And so that Venus trine Mars, geocentric and heliocentric, may bode well for relationships. And if you're able to take a sensible approach, deal with each person as an individual. Each person has their own outlook, their own way of looking at things, and that is something you need to respect. But if you can respect that, and if you can pay attention to the small details, thinking about what people like, what people don't like, what people don't want to hear. If you can do that, and I think actually you can, if you make the effort, it can really make all the difference. So overall, Aries, I think actually it can be quite a good day, but I do feel that attention to detail could really matter. Taurus, I was just looking at the heliocentric chart. I was doing that with Aries, and I think this heliocentric chart, it doesn't just have an impact on Aries, it also has an impact on Taurus. And the thing about this heliocentric chart is that there is a grand trine. And this grand trine involves Venus and Mars and Uranus. And of course, Venus is your ruler. And so with Venus aspecting Mars and Uranus, I do think that could actually be quite exciting, could really move you forward. Now, this grand trine is obviously a heliocentric chart. And when you're looking at a heliocentric chart, you are looking at energies which are perhaps not as accessible as with the geocentric chart, because the geocentric chart is very Earth focused. The heliocentric chart is about the solar system in general. So it may take a bit of time to be able to tune into that grand trine, but if you make the effort and you see what's available, and you don't have fixed opinions, because if you have fixed opinions and fixed ideas about what you're going to do, what you want to do, you're very tied down to this earth on which you live, and it's just very difficult to you to move forward. But if you're open to possibilities, and if you're ready to have a day of surprises, where you're not tied to any particular course of action, then I think that you can start to really tune into this grand trine. And it helps, I think, to have a fairly spiritual approach, because you're dealing with high level cosmic energies with this grand trine, Venus, Mars, Uranus, and it's available for you. But you've got to have the right state of mind. You've got to really make the effort to tune into it. And what kind of change do you want to bring about? And So that's something that you should be thinking about. And also, Taurus, it's important today that you make a special effort to enjoy yourself. I mean, enjoy yourself in your own way, not in a chaotic way, though. I mean, don't just take every moment as it comes. Just, if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. If you don't, well, too bad. What would you like to do? And plan it. And if you do get the planning right, I think that things can actually work out very well. And other people quite possibly are going to be there for you. There is still that geocentric Venus trine Mars. Okay, it's starting to separate. Venus is getting ready to move into Taurus. That's going to be great when Venus moves into Taurus. Venus is currently in its detriment, but it is making a trine to Mars, but it's getting ready to move into its own sign. But with Venus trine Mars, that does give you some dynamism, and that Venus trine Mars is repeated heliocentrically, because we got a heliocentric Venus Mars trine, which is linked to a grand trine involving Uranus. So that may say something about other people and what other people can provide. Other people can be very motivating, and they might want to do things their own way. You don't have to do everything another person tells you to do, but there is certainly a way of getting through to people. And with Venus, Mars, and Uranus coming together in that heliocentric grand trine, I think that you have a chance to be excited by your contacts with other people. So Don't ignore the social dimension, but don't obsess about it. It's not absolutely essential that you spend today with other people, that you do things their way. That's not what today is about. I mean, today is about doing things according to some plan. You don't want to have a completely fixed plan, but I mean, that is essential, actually, that you don't have a fixed plan, but you've got to be quite deliberate in what you're doing and not be vague, because if you're vague, you'll be going everywhere and you'll get nothing done. But if you have a sense of purpose, but also a sense of fun, then I do think, Taurus, that actually today could work out very well. Gemini, we know there's a lot going on in your sign. Sun, Mercury, Jupiter. Yeah, Jupiter's still in Gemini. Not for much longer. I think next Monday I think it's the 9th, Jupiter moves out of Gemini and moves into Cancer. But at the moment, you have got lots of ideas, I hope, and you're thinking about various possibilities, and you're moving quite quickly here. I mean, Mercury is your ruler. Mercury is Mercury's obviously in Gemini in its own sign, and it's moving quickly through Gemini. So this may be a situation where things are moving perhaps a little too quickly. The problem about things moving too quickly, Gemini, is that you may not have the opportunity to just hold to what you have. Something happens, you find that's interesting, you want to look at it, but then you're moved on, and you don't really have a chance to develop anything. And so that might be indicative of lots of opportunities, but lots of wasted opportunities. You get one idea after another, and these ideas follow each other, very, very quickly, and as a result, it could be a problem. So, if things are moving too quickly, you perhaps have to pause every now and then to take on board what's going on. And today, that's possibly something you can do with the moon moving into Virgo. Moon is it's a Mercury-ruled sign, Virgo, and the moon is actually kind of making the first quarter moon. I think that actually that first quarter moon isn't till tomorrow, but we have still, there's a first quarter moon feel to what's happening. Moon in Virgo, sun in Gemini, and so with that first quarter moon, this is the time where you need to stop and start to think about some of your ideas. You can't do everything at once, and you have to decide what is important. And with the moon in Virgo, you have a chance to just stay where you are, to stay in place, and you can slow things down while moon is in Virgo. And it's not going to be in Virgo forever. So while moon in Virgo might sound rather boring, it's actually quite essential, especially as it's taking place during this first quarter time. You had the new moon at the end of May, the 27th of May. So now you've got the first quarter. You're getting a feel for what's been happening in the last week. You've had lots of impressions, but now it's time to think about, which ones of which impressions were important, and just so take it easy. And take advantage of the fact that, in some respects, nothing is going on. The moon is in Virgo, but it's not making any aspects in Virgo. Not at the moment. The moon will make a square to the sun tomorrow, even early tomorrow if you're in the Americas. But it's not making that square to the sun today, I don't think. Let me just tell you when the actual first quarter moon is, in case you're interested. So the first quarter moon, well. Okay, if you're in the Americas, then, very late this evening, there will be that first quarter moon. So, yeah, if in the Americas, perhaps you have a chance to have a sort of a moment of clarity there. But if you're not in the Americas, it will be sort of early tomorrow morning. And, that is going to be, an important time for Gemini. So I am indicating that today is not a time for excitement. It's a time for structure, especially as the other aspect we've got. We don't have. In fact, the only main aspect today is Sun quintile Saturn. I say only. That Sun quintile Saturn is not trivial. The Sun is in Gemini. It's making a quintile to Saturn, and so it's kind of more of the same. Sun quintile Saturn is about you making the decision to slow things down, to create some structure. There's been a lot of ideas, and I am not just saying this to you. I'm kind of saying this to myself as well. I have been having ideas. If you've been watching, recent, video, I've been saying, I'd like to teach, I'd like to teach astrology online. That's very nice. But being a Gemini, I can sometimes be full of BS. I can have all sorts of ideas, and nothing comes of it. Actually, I had an idea about teaching astrology online. I started wanting to do it in 2020, and 5 years later, nothing's going on. Okay, I set up the YouTube channel, but I'm very aware of that. I have been having ideas, and I know myself that my ideas might not come to anything, and so I should be taking advantage of this Sun quintile Saturn, and you should be taking advantage of it as well. It's about taking everything that's been going on since May the 27th, since the new moon, and turning into something real. And that starts with ourselves. It's not about blaming someone else, or someone else has been interfering with our lives, has been pressurizing us. We can't do it because we've got other responsibilities. No, that's just nonsense. It's our responsibility, and through our own willpower, we can make it happen, and we can take the ideas that matter, and we can make them real. Cancer, moon is in Virgo, and From your perspective, I think that that is a good thing, that the moon is in Virgo. I mean, moon in Virgo is a nice place for the moon to be in. And, the whole subject of my video, what I will be talking about in the last part of the video, is the third house. And from a Cancerian perspective, the moon is in the third house. I mean, looking at your chart with, if we take Cancer as the first house and Leo as the second house, then Virgo is in the third house. And, it's a great place for the moon. The moon joys in the third house. I think I said that last month, so sorry if I'm repeating myself. But, it is a time when things are happening, things are working, and the moon doesn't make any aspects in the third house. I mean, well, it does make aspects in the end, but today it doesn't make any aspects. Okay, it might make a square to the sun very late in the day if you're in the Americas. But then, of course, that is the first quarter moon. But because there are no aspects, there's no pressure. So Cancer, what would you like to do? You're not going to, I don't think, be able to do anything spectacular, but I don't think that there's going to be a great deal of pressure. And so you can make your own choices. And that's certainly useful. Though, as you make your choices, as you decide what's important and what's not, try to have a broader vision if you possibly can. You don't want to be in a situation where you are just responsive. There is something happening, you respond, something you want to do, you just do it, and then you do something else, and you do something else. And there's just some possibility that you forget the broader picture, and you don't put your actions into context, because context does matter. So Cancer, think, what is the context? What is the context that actually matters? And don't just take every moment as it comes. I mean, I know one's supposed to do that. Treat every moment as being special. From a Buddhist perspective, you never know what's going to happen when you're the next moment. This every breath might be your last, and all that kind of thing. But try to think about where it might all be going. And we are approaching a first quarter moon. So the first quarter moon, actually, it's going to be this evening. If you're late this evening, if you're in the Americas, so it'll be tomorrow if you're not in the Americas. But first quarter moon is always an important time. When you think back to the new moon on May the 27th, just over a week ago, was it about a week ago, and what was starting, and what did you want to commence, and you may not have been sure where it was going, and now it can become clear. And when something becomes clear, you may reach a stage where you actually have to talk about it, where you have to communicate your insights. And that's very much in keeping with the idea that we've got the moon moving through your third house. Third house is about communications, and so there is the challenge to communicate, and that challenge may be about your basic inclination to be a private person. There are some things that you just don't want to talk about. Yeah, you might have insights, you might have realizations, but perhaps you want to keep them to yourself. And Cancer, the real challenge now might be to talk about them or to write about them. Now, that doesn't mean to say you have to tell the whole world about them. That's not the case. You may not have to tell anyone about them, but you have to move to a next stage. It's all very well having ideas or even having fears. I mean, ideas and fears can come together. But whatever it is, you could at the very least put it down on paper, write it down, I mean, I know people don't write things down so much anymore, but it would be a good idea. And yeah, if you have a chance to talk about something that inspires you, or even that worries you, then I think that with this first quarter moon, whether it's late today or into tomorrow, I think that would be a very healthy exercise for the average Cancerian. Leo. Leo, the main aspect today is a quintile between the Sun and Saturn. And so Sun and Saturn are 72 degrees apart, and 72 degrees, 1/5 of a circle. And Sun is, of course, your ruler. And, Sun and Saturn together are about discipline and structure. Now, this is not Sun square Saturn or Sun opposition Saturn. If it was Sun opposition Saturn or Sun square Saturn, I might be a bit negative about that. I might say, well, there might be frustrations, something holding you back. And so that would be a way of looking at a hard aspect between Sun and Saturn. But this is not like that. It's a quintile. And quintiles, I think, if anything, are a fortunate aspect, even if Saturn is involved. And one way of looking at the Sun quintile Saturn would be to say that it is about what you are trying to do and what you're trying to organize and how you are trying to get yourself together. And Leo, you have an idea about what it means to have got yourself together and what what that would require. And so, Leo, if you have a fantasy about how everything could be in order, everything could be be organized, you could lead a very efficient life. It sounds great, doesn't it? But if you have a fantasy about that, Leo, then don't treat it as mere fantasy. It can become real, and self-discipline is going to be very important. So if you are able to discipline yourself, then I think it really is worth it. I mean, Leos are capable of disciplining themselves. Leo's a fixed sign. Once you decide to do something, you go and do it. And so do make the effort, and whatever you're thinking, it can become real, and you can put yourself in a position, where you become, hardworking, efficient. And of course, if you're hardworking and efficient, you can start to, really sort of, get yourself together. Now, there could be specific ways in which this Sun quintile Saturn is working, and it might reflect also other people and other people's impact on you. And, sometimes other people can get out of hand, and they might be having an excessive impact on you, perhaps through their irresponsible behavior, or it could be inconsiderate behavior, and you might regard other people as being just difficult to control. It's like the tide. How do you do it? But with Sun quintile Saturn, I think actually you can be quite influential, and you can get people to listen to you. And if you want people to be doing things in a particular way, and if you have an idea that other people can be behaving in a particular way, then I think, Leo, that you can actually put this idea into action. So I think that's absolutely possible. And additionally, Sun quintile Saturn can say something about relationships. And so this would especially be the case if you're in a relationship. And as I always have to say, relationships can have many different natures. It doesn't need to be about a lifetime partnership or anything romantic. It can be other kinds of relationships. But Sun quintile Saturn, relationships can be structured, and they can be brought together. And it's two-way structuring. It's not like you structuring another person. It's also another person having an influence on you, and you perhaps being aware how you might have been careless in the past. And so by listening to what another person says, you accept what they say. It's Sun quintile Saturn. It's not a time for sort of egos to get in the way of constructive action where you and other people can come together and perhaps sort out your differences, or find ways of cooperating. So this Sun quintile Saturn aspect, it really helps you, with relationships at all levels, not just one-to-one. The group, if you're working in a team, or you're just aware that there are just lots of people around you, that Sun quintile Saturn is going to be very helpful, and it's going to allow you to to make the most of other people's company, and also other people can they can have an impact on you. And so don't be committed or overly committed to anything, because a bit of change brought about perhaps by another person's suggestion can actually be very helpful. Virgo, moon's moving into your sign. I think that that's something that you're quite happy about, or you should be quite happy about. It means that you can be more open, more upfront, and you're going to be feeling just generally more comfortable with the world in which you live. And with the moon moving into Virgo, I think it's going to be possible to be more open. There may have been things that you have, for one reason or another, you've been keeping to yourself, and you haven't wanted to be entirely open about it. But now with moon in Virgo, you can be. But I don't think there's a lot of pressure. The moon doesn't really make any aspects in Virgo, at least not until late this evening if you're in the Americas. So that gives you choice. So there's nothing actually that you have to do, but it makes sure that you do something. And I think you can be more sort of open and honest. Though the moon is moving towards the first quarter. And so first quarter moon in Virgo, sun in Gemini. We had a new moon in Gemini on, I think, May the 27th. So, think back to that new moon and, what's been going on over the last week. What have you been trying to do? What have you been trying to achieve? And you might have started this new lunar cycle with high hopes. There were things that you wanted to do. Now, what if you had just decided to spend the last week doing nothing? Well, that's your choice. But even if you've been doing nothing over the last week, that first quarter moon can't be avoided. And what this first quarter moon is about asking yourself, how is it going? How have things been developing since May the 27th? Have you been moving forward with anything? It's kind of like a progress report, or a kind of a self-evaluation of how far you've gone. And so with this first quarter moon, you can look at your progress, and if you haven't made enough progress at this stage, it's not a problem, because it's just the first quarter moon. Now, in a week's time, it'll be the full moon coming up. Now, full moon, that is more serious. But at this stage, it's there's still time to make up for lost ground. Now, the thing about this first quarter moon, it is a first quarter moon involving the sun in Gemini, moon in Virgo. there won't be another first quarter moon with the sun in Gemini and the moon in Virgo for another year. So, don't just take it for granted. Just don't assume that everything is, you've got the ability to just sit it out and just wait for another opportunity. No, if you feel that something is important to you and you've been kind of in theory trying to work on it, well, don't slack off. And this first quarter moon may put you under some pressure, and you may start to think about what you need to do, and that would be healthy. And it's kind of appropriate that this first quarter moon is happening at the beginning of a week, and so you might want to start to think about what you would like to achieve by the full moon. And that full moon is when is the full moon? The full moon is on June the 11th. So that's June the 11th. Well, that's Wednesday of next week. So you've got a bit of time before that full moon. But maybe in that sort of typically Virgo fashion, you could start to think about what your goals are. What you would like to achieve by the time of that full moon. And don't forget, Virgo, that Mercury is still in Gemini. Mercury is moving very quickly through Gemini, and because of Mercury moving quickly through Gemini, Mercury obviously works very well in Gemini, and it's now moving away from the Sun, so the Mercury is not under the pressure it used to be. So over the last couple of days, over the weekend, and you might have felt that you weren't able to think straight, and there was something holding you back. And now things have changed. Mercury is moving away from the Sun, so it's moving quickly. So make sure you understand what is important, and you have to perhaps make a few distinctions here. There may be a lot of things to excite you, but what are the things that matter? And so really do ask yourself that question, Virgo, because I think it matters. And I have to remind you, Jupiter is still in Gemini. Jupiter is still working for you. It's an ambitious energy, but next week, next Monday, 9th, Jupiter will be out of Gemini and it will be in Cancer. And so do take advantage of Jupiter as it moves through that last degree or last couple of degrees of the sign. So overall, Virgo, I think it's a day when you can be active, upfront, you can be ready to take on the world, and you need to realize that now might be the time. And it could be challenging, and there could be pressure to get going with some of your ambitions, because if you leave it too long, if you leave it until the full moon, then by the time of the full moon you may feel that there's been a wasted opportunity, and we don't want that to happen. Libra, just a reminder that Venus is moving through now the last degrees of Aries, and Venus in Aries has advantages and disadvantages. Venus in Aries is in its detriment. It's not the best place for Venus, and so Venus moving into Taurus is probably something to be looking forward to, even though Libra and Taurus are very different signs. I think that with Venus moving into Taurus, you can afford to be more serious, and you can decide what matters, and with Venus in Taurus you may also be able to get away from another person's influence. So that's possibly something that's been going on. There's someone who has forced you to be paying too much attention to them, but it's coming to an end. Venus is moving out of Aries, and additionally, Venus is making a conjunction to Chiron. And I really should have talked about that Venus conjunct Chiron when I was talking about the horoscopes for the weekend, but I'll talk about it now because Venus it's pretty close to Chiron. It's less than a degree from this minor planet, and it just may be a time, Libra, where you want to do things differently. That can be what Chiron is about. And Chiron doesn't just follow the established order, and Chiron wants to do things differently. And that's because Chiron, if you think about Chiron's orbit as it goes around the sun, it has a very eccentric orbit. It's kind of all over the place. What do they call it? Elliptical. And that was why the discoverer of Chiron referred to its orbit as maverick, and that word maverick has stuck. And so that may say something about you and the way you want to do things. You know that other people have their influence and that you're supposed to do things their way, but you don't really want to do things their way with Venus conjunct Chiron. And you just may feel that it's time, Libra, for you to actually start to do things differently, making your own decisions. And it may even feel that you have to do something which is rebellious just to prove a point, just to prove that you are different, to prove that you are independent. And that might actually, Libra, be quite a good thing to do, because you will be making it clear who you are and who you're not. And people may not appreciate it in the first instance when you act as a rebel, but you will be leaving a lasting impression, and maybe that's something that you would like to do. And also, Libra, today you don't have to do things anyone's way. That is important. And other people may not matter as much as you think they do. And there are some things, Libra, that perhaps you should be doing on your own. Though, as far as close relationships are concerned, Venus is still making a trine to Mars geocentrically, and heliocentrically. In fact, there's an exact trine between Venus and Mars. So this Venus-Mars aspect can be good for relationships. In fact, heliocentrically, you've got Venus trine Mars trine Uranus. Now, that's kind of interesting because it's saying that relationships can actually really work, provided they take place, in your way. Everything is done your way. It's not a time to be doing things other people's way. Absolutely not. And Venus trine Uranus is very independent-minded. And a lot of people are independent-minded. And so Venus trine Uranus, you doing things differently, it kind of fits with what I've just said about Venus conjunct Chiron. You want to do things differently. Oh, by the way, just to remind you, here is here's the heliocentric chart. You see, there's Venus, Mars, and Uranus. So Venus is making the trine to Uranus. Venus is making a trine to Mars. So you can see that Venus heliocentrically is very active at the moment, and I do think that's going to help you, and it's going to just remind you that you are different. You are an individual, and if you put your individuality first, then that's the best way of approaching relationships. And relationships can work because of that. If someone does not appreciate you as an individual, then you probably don't want to spend too much time with them. But on the other hand, there are people out there who do appreciate your unique contribution, and unique is the operative word. If you can be unique and creative and inspiring and if you can, stick to your inner principles, then you'll be doing the right thing, and that should, bode well for Monday, and it should mean that by and large things work out for you. Scorpio, you're aware of other people's influence. Not that you're going to be influenced, but you're aware that you have to take some account of them, but nothing is compulsory. Nothing is too compulsory. And from a social viewpoint, with the moon moving through Virgo, then you can, in many cases, enjoy other people's company. Okay, you might have to consider their rules to some extent, but not, I don't think, to any great extent. And in fact, you can be with people and you can socialize, but in such a way where there's no obligation. So it might actually be a good day for going somewhere, meeting people for a short period of time, deciding you've had enough, and then just leaving. There's no obligation here. There's no pressure, and so that does allow you to have a socially active day if that's what you want. There is no pressure. If you don't want to meet anyone, then you don't have to. Now, probably the main aspect today, or series of aspects, exists on the heliocentric level, not the geocentric one. So I've looked at the heliocentric chart, and heliocentrically there is a grand trine involving Mars, Venus, and Uranus. If you haven't seen it, here it is. Here's the heliocentric picture. So we got a Venus-Mars trine, and there's Uranus, and so you think about that. You think about the solar system. We put the sun at the center of the solar system, and then you've got this triangular relationship around the sun. Venus, Mars, Uranus. That's really very powerful, and the fact that Mars is trine Uranus, Mars is trine Venus, that actually allows you to be an exciting and independent-minded person, but it may not be entirely obvious. So when we're talking about heliocentric aspects, we're dealing with something quite high level, and ordinary people having to deal with their ordinary lives may sometimes just not have access to these heliocentric aspects, but you can. I'm telling you about them as well, so you have that extra advantage. So all these people, all these Scorpios, wandering around trying to make sense of things, they don't have the advantage of that knowledge, do they? Because I'm telling you, sorry, I shouldn't sing my own praises or make myself more important than I am, because I'm not. But you are in that position to know that there is this grand trine going on heliocentrically, and so it's energy that is available for you, and you have to find it, and you have to find it in that Scorpio way. Scorpios can feel things that other people can't, and so where is that energy? Where is that power? And Scorpio, I do think that you can find it. Now, as far as specifics are concerned, it's true that Venus is trine Mars, and we have a geocentric trine between Venus and Mars. Anyway, it's something I've been talking about a lot, and I've said that I think that geocentric trine between Venus and Mars can be helpful with relationships and getting on with people and making the right impression. But now we've got a heliocentric exact Venus-Mars trine as well. So that really reinforces the connection between Venus and Mars. So this is a time when you can get people's attention, and you can come over as someone who is really interesting, and you've got something to say, you've got something to communicate. Of course, you need to be prepared to communicate. Sometimes Scorpios are not prepared. They like to sometimes keep things to themselves. I mean, that's up to you. But I do think that there is this potential here to have a very powerful day, and you can actually create a lot of change. And if you don't like the way things are going with this with this heliocentric grand trine, then you can use that transformative power, which is such an intrinsic part of being a Scorpio. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, there are things you feel are important. Yeah, they are important, and you do want to get going on them, and you perhaps realize that if you don't get going on them now, then things might not be so good in the future, or you might miss your chance. And this is tied up with the fact that we are building up to a first quarter moon. And so, we had a new moon on May the 27th, a new moon in Gemini, a new moon in your opposite sign, and now the moon has moved on and it's in Virgo, and it's applying to a square of the sun, which will happen late this evening if you're in the Americas, will happen tomorrow if you're elsewhere. But this moon trine sun should be motivating, and it should. Did I say moon trine sun? I mean moon square sun. It doesn't even matter if that square is not exact. The point is, moon is in Virgo, sun is in Gemini. They're both mutable signs. There's a square relationship between the moon and the sun. So Sagittarius, it's a time to be thinking about what you need to do, and also potentially how you need to utilize your contacts, the people the people you've met. They are there for a purpose. You can utilize them, and this may say something about relationships. You're thinking about people who but you may not feel too comfortable with, and you're asking, why do you know them, what their purpose is. And it could just be this is a time where you're starting to see what the purpose of someone is. People come into your life for a reason, and they leave for a reason. They come into your life. Okay, they may come into your life forever, but sometimes they come into your life for just a few days, and they're there, and they're available, and then they just move on. And so do think about this, and just remember, this is the last week of Jupiter being in Gemini, the last week of Jupiter, your ruler, being in your opposite sign of Gemini. And all things being equal, Jupiter in Gemini is, for Sagittarius, about other people, for relationships. What has happened in relationships over the last year. Now, maybe that nothing has happened. This is 12-sign astrology. It is a generalization, and let's be honest, it very often doesn't work. So it may mean nothing to you. All of these comments about Jupiter being in Gemini, and of course, Sagittarians. A lot of Sagittarians actually don't believe in astrology. That is true. Jim Morrison was a Sagittarius. I don't remember anything, but there was this recording of his concert where he was. He told his audience that he was a Sagittarius, and of course his fans were sort of saying, "I'm a Sagittarius, I'm a Sagittarius, I'm a Sagittarius," and then he went on. Then he said something like, "Astrology is BS." Of course, that's a very Sagittarian approach, but you probably do believe in astrology, because otherwise you wouldn't be listening to this, would you? And so I don't know how this Jupiter in Gemini is working for you, and but all things being equal, it is about relationships, and it is about your attitude to relationships. And yeah, Jupiter's only got a week left before it moves into Cancer, and then it won't be in Gemini for another 11 years. So perhaps this moon, first quarter moon is just a reminder that you have to perhaps use people. When I say use people, I don't mean use people in an unpleasant or manipulative way. Maybe utilize people, take advantage of people. No, I don't mean that in a bad way. Just see how they can help, because I think that they can help if you give them a chance. But certain people may not be available forever. And this might be a realization you have today and tomorrow when we do have this first quarter moon. Capricorn. The moon is in Gemini. Sorry, it's not. It's in Virgo. Moon is moving into Virgo, and I think that is a good thing from a Capricorn viewpoint. The moon is in an earth sign. Uranus is in Taurus, but I don't really count Uranus when I'm trying to work out whether or not anything's in an earth sign. But the moon is now in an earth sign. Of course, Capricorn is an earth sign, and you've perhaps been feeling recently that there haven't been enough planets in earth signs. Things might not have been, especially grounded. And so with the moon in Virgo, you probably just feel better. You just feel that there's more space, there's less pressure, and it may be that things that seemed serious not so long ago, even yesterday, even early this morning, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, things that seem serious just are not quite so serious now. And you can see opportunities now where not so long ago there didn't seem to be opportunities, and you may feel more comfortable with your broad environment now that the moon is out of Leo. And that doesn't mean to say that you should do nothing, and that you shouldn't just you can just enjoy the fact that there's less pressure, but there is a quintile between the Sun and Saturn. It's a 72-degree aspect between the two. And so Saturn is your ruler. So that Sun quintile Saturn does allow you to really kind of be a Capricorn. Capricorns are associated traditionally with being sensible and hardworking. If you read any astrology book, that's probably what it will say for Capricorn. Sensible, hardworking, down to earth, perhaps materialistic. And those traits, assuming they exist, are probably quite pronounced now that Sun is making that quintile to Saturn. And so it is a day, Capricorn, when you can really get yourself together. And you can really excel in just sorting everything out. And you will have just a vision about how you would like it to be. You perhaps will have an idea of a timeline. And so you think about that, and you think, we're going to sort everything out now. And you can indeed get it all together. And so whatever that vision is, don't get depressed about it. Think, it's just too much. It's too much to organize. It's not too much. You can do it, Capricorn. And this Sun quintile Saturn may actually also say something about your health. Again, just a reminder, I'm not giving any health medical advice here. This is all just lifestyle stuff. I'm not a medical astrologer. And, with this Sun quintile Saturn, you just have a chance to, you have an idea about what a healthy life really means. You have a belief about it, in terms of diet, exercise, lack of stress, that kind of thing. Yeah, that kind of thing. So you have all these ideas, Capricorn. And it's not just theory. you can put it into practice, and you make the effort, and it can work. And so that's a way in which this Sun quintile Saturn could actually work. Sun quintile Saturn could also work with your ideas about your animals, because the Sun is in the 6th house from Capricorn, and Sun is making a quintile to Saturn. So if you are a pet owner, of course when I say pet, I'm talking about an animal, 6th house. This is smaller than a goat. I'm not talking about your cow or your horse. Well, you certainly shouldn't have. I certainly hope you don't have a pet whale. I mean, I was reading. By the way, I was reading of this book. It was just talking about an analogy of people keeping killer whales in captive killer whales, and this man was talking about swimming around a swimming pool. He was talking about the rights of nature, and he couldn't. It was a small swimming pool, and swimming around and round in a swimming pool and having to turn everywhere. I'm talking about how uncomfortable it was for a human swimming in a swimming pool, and then you think about putting whales and killer whales in pools for 50 years. And I mean, I know that's obvious, we know that, but anyway, I'm certainly not talking about your pet whale, because people shouldn't have pet whales. I'm talking about your pet smaller animal. And with the Sun quintile Saturn, you can perhaps organize your animal or train your animal. So if your animal if you've been having a disagreement with your pet dog or your pet cat with this Sun quintile Saturn, one does sometimes have disagreements with one's dog. I mean, I don't really know about cats, but if you've had disagreements with your dog, this Sun quintile Saturn may give you an opportunity to sort things out, and it could be a good opportunity for training. I mean, I don't know who's training who. Maybe your dog can train you, and maybe you can understand what your dog is wanting you to do. But whatever it is, I think that this Sun quintile Saturn might have an implication for you and your animals, if you have animals. Again, small animals. So, but it's more of the same with Sun quintile Saturn. It's about getting things together. And Capricorn, I think that really you can get things together, and it's not a hopeless task. It can be real, and you do have the vision and the determination and the willpower to create a particular kind of order, and it's all for the good. Aquarius, it's probably quite a serious day. You feel that things aren't entirely easy, and you realize that some things are complicated. It's not that I don't think that there's any dramatic event that needs your attention, but you just get a feeling that you do have to take things seriously, and you need to take things one step at a time, and you don't want to lose track of things. That really is important, Aquarius, and I think you know that. And so you're not going to want to sort of overwhelm yourself with inputs, and that may say something also about how you relate to other people, and you can always perhaps be asking yourself, is it really worth the effort? And there are also things you want to keep to yourself. There are things that you're going to want to work out, in your own way. But there is a quintile between the Sun and Saturn, and this Sun quintile Saturn it's the main aspect today. You could say it's really the only aspect today. Sun and Saturn are 72 degrees apart. And there are a number of ways of looking at this quintile, and that may just say something about your approach. Sun quintile Saturn is about you being serious, but also feeling that there's something that you can offer, no one else can offer it, and it's very important, and you need to handle it, in the right way. And I'm actually thinking about the hexagram 50 in the cauldron, and this is not an I Ching reading, but there's just an image from the I Ching, and the image of a cauldron in the I Ching is it's a cauldron which has got something very special in it. It's not just any pan, the cauldron. It's sort of a ritual vessel, and it contains everything that you are. And the I Ching reading puts a lot of emphasis on the handles. What kind of condition are the handles in? Are they corroding? Are they made of jade? Are they made of a really fine material? Because it's just important that you carry yourself in the right way, and that's what the cauldron is about, making sure that everything that you are is properly presented. Because if it's not properly presented, then it could go to waste. And this Sun quintile Saturn may say something about your thoughts on this, that you have got something very, very special to offer. But you're also asking, is it ever going to be realized, achieved, and appreciated? And with this Sun quintile Saturn, you actually have a chance, through your own power and through your own efforts, to bring everything together and really present yourself and you and what you represent. You can really create something really incredible and powerful, and something that will be taken seriously. But it is through your own efforts, and so that might be something you want to be working on today. Additionally, this Sun quintile Saturn might be about relationships. The reason is obvious, because Saturn rules Aquarius, which is your sign. Sun rules Leo, which is your opposite sign. Sorry, to repeat myself, I always say this. But I'm just trying to make myself clear. And these two planets are 72 degrees apart. And what this could indicate, Aquarius, is that you have a chance through your efforts and perhaps another person's efforts to really create a feeling of oneness. And oneness might sound a little bit too vague and spiritual, but or perhaps we should think about it in terms of a sort of a constructive harmony that can be created. But it starts with a vision. It starts with an idea about what is possible, about the way you and someone else can cooperate. And if you have an idea about how a relationship can be, then there's a very good chance with that Sun quintile Saturn that idea can actually be realized in real life. And there's nothing coercive about it. It's not natural, because the quintile is not a natural aspect, but it's through your efforts and perhaps going out of your way to accommodate someone without compromising yourself. If you do that and you show that you're serious, then I do think that your efforts can be reciprocated. Pisces, the moon is now in Virgo. And of course, Virgo is your opposite sign. And so, with the moon in Virgo, you might be putting more attention than usual on other people. You're certainly aware of what other people can do, what other people can't do, and you're ready to listen, and you're ready to take into account who people are, what they've got, what they've got to offer. But I don't think that you're really going to have to necessarily compromise anything, but you might have to move a bit. And this is connected with the fact that we've got a run up to a first quarter moon. So first quarter moon, the sun is in Gemini. Moon has moved on 90 degrees, almost 90 degrees, and it's now in Virgo. And so, you think back, there was a new moon on May the 27th, and that new moon may have had a particular influence on you. Some Pisceans may have felt that new moon was asking you to, look after yourself, look after your own interests, to decide what matters and what was integral to your security. So that could have been how that new moon was working. And now the moon has moved on, and it is now in Virgo, first quarter moon. And so with this first quarter moon, it could be about the challenge of the other. You have everything sorted out, or at least you're trying to sort everything out. You're trying to look after your own interests, but then you've got to consider another person and what other people are trying to offer and suggest. And this is a challenge. And you might feel that you just want to ignore other people. You don't need that kind of challenge. You're happy where you are. But I do think that you have to make an effort to understand what people are saying and what people are suggesting. And they may not be saying or suggesting anything, just through their actions and through what they're doing. Even if they're not trying to get your attention, it represents a challenge. And so, Pisces, it may be a time with the moon in Virgo where you have to take into account another person or another group of people without actually wanting to. And you're happy how you're sorted out. You don't need them. You've worked it all out. But then it is in your interests to try to work out the challenge. What are you being told to do? And it may be a hint to the future. I mean, a hint to the fact that Jupiter has been in Gemini for over a year now, and it's getting ready to move into Cancer. And I think Jupiter in Cancer is going to be great for Pisceans, and I'll be talking about that next week, because I think it's June the 9th. Next Monday, June the 9th, I think it is, that Jupiter moves into Cancer, and that's going to be great. But there's still things to work out while Jupiter is in Gemini in this last week, and so with the moon making this kind of square to the sun, even though the square to the sun for most of us is going to be tomorrow. If you're in the Americas, it will be late this evening. It is a bit of a challenge, and you do have to take into account what other people are suggesting, because you can work out a great deal on your own, in your own way, but you can't work out everything, and there just may be a few things that you're missing. And that's all I'm going to say on the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 21, which is biting through. And this hexagram, biting through, is about punishment. People do things wrong and they have to be corrected. I mean, it could be us doing something wrong and we have to be corrected. And the reason it's biting through is because you have this idea that you've got a gold core, so you've got something made of gold, but there's this sort of hard lever outside, and you have to get through that hard lever in order to get to the gold. So it is about punishment, but it's also about rehabilitation and about trying to make the best of ourselves and other people. And so that's what this hexagram is broadly about. And the bottom line moves. And so the bottom line in the I Ching, well, it can be about the feet, and there is in I Ching is talking about toes, and there are different descriptions of what this means about the toes. Now the toes, it may be talking about some kind of punishment, like the stocks where your toes are covered. There is a potentially extreme translation that, not that I can translate anything into Chinese, but reading what other people say, reading what James Legge said in his interpretation of this, he actually talked about toes being cut off. Now, that seems to be extreme. And, okay, whenever you see parts of a body mentioned in an I Ching reading, you just have to give a warning about parts of a body. So I have to say, watch your toes. Don't stub your toe. Be careful if you're cutting your toenails. Whatever you're doing with your toes, look after them. Make sure your shoes are fitting properly, because it is the bottom line. And in terms of parts of a body, the bottom line can be about the feet and the toes. In the same way that in astrology, Pisces is linked with the feet, and in general, it's talking about the bottom line making a mistake, but not a serious mistake. So it is the punishment for a small a misdemeanor. So the punishment for a misdemeanor is not very large, and so we do something wrong, but it's at the early stages, it's okay. The consequences are not excessive, but it's important to be aware that something has been done wrong. Now, that might be an awareness of what we have done wrong, but it also might be an awareness of what someone else has done wrong. So that is something we have to think about. And so if you find that someone has done something wrong, and you're in a position of power, then don't be excessive. Be forgiving. Accept that this is probably a minor transgression. It's nothing too serious, and any punishment or admonition, certainly doesn't have to be over the top. Now, this hexagram biting through, it does move, because we've got the bottom line moving, and so the hexagram it moves to is hexagram 35, which is progress, and it's actually very good progress. And this progress, this hexagram talks about getting an audience 3 times. I think it's an audience with the king or with some higher official. So if you're trying to get an audience with someone, then maybe now is the chance. It could be an interview, someone you want to get through to. And so if you look at the whole day overall, it is a day when you get something a little wrong, or someone else gets something wrong, but it's not serious. It can be corrected. It's just an early mistake, and you correct that mistake. You keep going, and then you find that you are making progress, or perhaps someone else is making progress as well. Perhaps everyone is making progress. So, in the end, it looks like being quite an effective day, when really in the end things really can be moving. And now I want to talk about the 3rd house. And why do I want to talk about the 3rd house? I haven't done a video before where I've talked about a house, and so there's something about the 3rd house, which is why would I want to talk about the 3rd house? Because I want to tell you about the 3rd house. And even, do I want to teach about the 3rd house? Well, the 3rd house is about teaching. And this is something I've been bothered about recently. Should I be making more of an effort to teach astrology online? And I don't know. I don't even know how to go about it, unless you say, well, I'm already doing it with my videos and through examples and so on. But I wanted to start by just thinking about the weekend and what was going on over the weekend, and it's all relatively trivial. But here's my chart to start with. Let's show you why I'm thinking about why I'm thinking about what I'm thinking. So here's my horoscope, and Placidus. My Placidus third house cusp is 26 degrees 51 Gemini. So that means that transiting Jupiter has just gone into my third house, and Jupiter will, in the end, quite soon, in a week's time, it will go into my whole sign third house, because that's when Jupiter goes into Cancer. And I should say with houses that houses are not like signs. Signs have absolute boundaries. When a planet moves into a sign, it's a different sign. It doesn't matter whether it's 0 degrees 1. If it's 0 degrees 1 Gemini, that's Gemini. 29 degrees 59 Taurus, that's Taurus. There's no argument about it. It's an absolutely fixed thing. Now, houses, by contrast, there's more scope for flow, and it depends on how you're looking at it. Although with whole sign houses, of course, when a planet moves into a sign, it has changed house. But if you're using Placidus house system, it's different, and I don't think one should necessarily tie oneself to any particular house system. I mean, I use Placidus house cusp, but I'm very aware of whole sign house cusps as well, and so I'm not especially dogmatic about houses and house boundaries. Although if you're using whole sign astrology, if you're using a technique which is particularly associated with whole sign houses, like annual progressions, or you're using, I assume, one of the techniques of Hellenistic astrology, although I'm not claiming to be an expert on Hellenistic astrology. The explosion in Hellenistic astrology was rather sort of after my time, and so for me, Jupiter is moving into my third house, and I think that Placidus house cusp is quite an important one, and so I would be prepared to use Placidus houses rather than the whole sign houses to talk about that changeover. And I was thinking, when I was on Saturday, I was thinking about my car. I've got a car. I've got this Volvo, and it hasn't actually moved since COVID, and it's been stuck in a garage. And so this is supposedly something you should not do. The car is not going to be in great condition if you leave it for 4 years. But then I did actually talk to the mechanic, because I have to thinking about getting the thing sorted out. I did talk to the mechanic a few months ago, and he said, "Oh, it's not a problem. You just put a new battery in and top up the tank, and it'll be fine." I mean, he's an expert on Volvos, so that's what he said. So he wasn't particularly negative about it. But I was thinking about this car on Saturday morning. I was picking Scotch broom at the time. Scotch broom is this invasive weed that covers the Pacific Northwest, and sort of every Saturday morning I spend a few hours picking Scotch broom, and it's you have to try to take it out by its root. I mean, Scotch broom is incredible stuff. A Scotch broom plant can have 18,000 seeds, and the seeds can last up to 90 years. So it's a complete nightmare thing. But I was thinking about the car, and I was thinking, well, Jupiter's about to go into my third house, and so this is a time logically I should be sorting out the car, and because the third house is ruled by cars, isn't it? Sorry, that's the wrong way of putting it. Cars are ruled by the third house, so when you think about third house action, you think about cars. And I was also thinking, in terms of embracing the symbolism of the third house, that it's probably a good time to get that car working with Jupiter moving into the third house. And Jupiter might actually be pleased with me, because that is a third house activity. There might be other sort of more negative manifestations of the third house, but by actually embracing the positive and getting the car to actually work. That would be a good third house thing to do. And I was coming back from pulling Scotch broom, and I was a passenger in the car, and the car broke down, and that was a very third house thing to happen as well. This was perhaps a sign that Jupiter was moving into my third house, and you had to sort of. And I was thinking about the breakdown stuff, and had I remembered to sign on to AAA, and so I called AAA, and I was a passenger, and I wasn't sure whether I wasn't even sure whether I was signed up to AAA, but I was signed up to AAA, and yes, if you're a passenger, you do get coverage. So I had to, and so sort of waiting for a couple of hours, waiting for the tow truck, and it was interesting waiting for this tow truck. As you know. If you've been watching these videos long enough, if I've been boring you for long enough, I'm sometimes very negative about America, and I sometimes get criticized for being negative about America. But it was kind of interesting that I was stuck there in the road, and I think there were probably about 6 people passing cars offered help. Some thought I'd run out of gas, or they offered to help. So I was quite touched by that, and so. I was reminded, well, maybe America isn't as bad as I'm claiming. People really wanted to help. They had no reason to help. It was just why should they help? But I did get it was about 6 offers, and I was quite surprised by that. And so that does perhaps put America in a favourable light. Maybe it would happen in any country, but I don't know. It's something I noticed, and so I was thinking about this third house, and I was also thinking about what was going on at the time of the breakdown, and I did quickly want to just look at that chart, because I think it shows that something's kind of working. And so here's the approximate time. So this was in Washington State, and in fact, it broke down during. It was a part of the road where the traffic was being slow because there were road works. So it was a terrible place to break down. Well, it seemed to be, but actually it was fine because the traffic was moving slowly. So that's always a good thing. And so here is a chart for the breakdown. I remember I was talking about the sun being on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and so. Here's the sun. You see, the sun was at 10 degrees 37 Gemini, so it was about 1 in the afternoon when the breakdown happened. There's Mars at 10:58 Gemini, sorry 20:58 Leo, and there's Saturn at 0 degrees 28 Aries. So you can see that the sun is exactly on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. And the sun was pretty close to the mid-heaven, so the sun was, very prominent. Of course, I'm a Gemini. I don't know whether that really makes any difference, but that's perfect. That's perfect astrology. How close was the midpoint aspect? By the way, the sun was on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. It was only 7 arc minutes out, and so that's a perfect manifestation of Mars-Saturn. I've talked about Mars-Saturn, and I've said, it's about death and destruction and whatever. It can be about frustration, and it can be about breakdown. That can be a manifestation of how the Mars-Saturn works, and it needn't be dramatic. It needn't be about a fatal car accident. It could just be about the engine not working anymore. And so now I just wanted to just really talk about the third house. Not just because I've got it, but I just thought it's a good opportunity to talk about it. Now, as I said, a house is not something that is fixed in stone. And it does depend on your house system. And the third house is a house which its associations. Well, one association is through communication. Is communication and teaching, And this is why I've thought maybe with Jupiter moving into my third house, I should be considering upping the teaching, the online teaching, and what can I do? And if you look at my own third house, so here's my chart, you'll notice that I have got Venus in Cancer in the third house. Now, my Venus is quite close to the IC. I used to think for a long time that my birth time was 3:30 a.m. Then I found out after my mother died that I was actually born at 3:35 a.m. At 3:30 a.m., Venus was within 5 degrees of my IC. I think my Venus was close enough to my IC to be thinking that my Venus might actually starting to have a fourth house feel to it. But with 3:35, it's a bit further away from the IC. So, but still, Venus in the Cancer would be, teaching, doing this YouTube video. That's a very Venus in Cancer kind of thing, and it may say something about my approach, but particularly as Venus is trine Jupiter. Yes, and I've got Jupiter about to move into my third house. Well, Placidus is already moving into my third house, and Jupiter is soon going to be making a conjunction to my Venus, so it's going to be quite a third house time for it. But the third house does, in terms of other things that the third house is about, of course, it's about, it's not just about communication, it's not just about teaching, it's about siblings. Of course, in Vedic astrology, there's a distinction between older and younger. It's not always just, it depends which sibling it is. But I think in Western astrology, the siblings, and it's about all the communication stuff and the writing, and it's about facts. And when we think about the third house, well, indeed any house, we should be thinking about the opposite house as well. The third and the ninth house are an axis, and so with the third house, in terms of the legal system, the third house can be about magistrates' courts, whereas, lower courts, in other words, certainly in the UK legal system, you've got the magistrates' courts, and then you've got the higher courts, and so the third and the ninth house is going to be the higher courts. The third house is about your immediate environment, and that means that it's connected with neighbors. And so, if you've been watching, my videos, I sometimes talk about neighbors, and that probably is because there's something to do with the third house. It's that those people who are around you, who you don't necessarily talk to, but in terms of geographical location, they are very close. And then, the third house, it kind of at the end, it sort of morphs into the fourth house. And I think that there is this feeling with some houses that, it's like with the seventh and the eighth. The seventh house, as you get deep into the eighth, into the seventh house, as you move into the seventh, it becomes more complicated, it becomes more messy, and then it moves into the eighth. And so there is there's a borderland between the seventh and the eighth house, which, right at the end of the seventh, and then you move into the eighth, and you're right in the eighth. But likewise, I think that with the third and the fourth, there is a borderland between the third and the fourth house. And I think that I would have said, for example, my Venus in Cancer is kind of on the borderland. I think it is more of a third house Venus from a fourth house Venus, but it's starting to have a fourth house feel to it. And that might say something about me. I'm actually quite an introvert. If you do the tests, I come over as an extreme introvert. So just because I'm doing a YouTube video doesn't mean I'm an extrovert. But so there is something fourth house-ish about my Venus, and so that's one way in which one can look at. The third house. And in astrology, it is said that certain planets joy in particular houses. For example, Saturn joys in the 12th house. I think the Sun joys in the 9th house, and the Moon joys in the 3rd house. And it is so appropriate, isn't it, that the moon joins in the third house, because it reminds us that the moon is a communication planet. That's something that I always say, that is a communication planet. It's perhaps communication from the heart rather than the mind. I mean, Donald Trump is someone who, he has a full moon and moon in Sagittarius, Sun in Gemini. I do think that Donald Trump communicates with his moon in Sagittarius, not with his Mercury in Cancer. And so the moon is a communication planet. It's about how we express ourselves. Michel Gauguin, in his research on the meanings of the 5 planets, he was saying that that an angular moon, he associated that with writing. So the moon actually does share a lot of characteristics with Mercury, but there's a subtle difference there. And so the moon joins in the third. And so what I thought I would do is just look at some people who had the moon in the third house, and just to ask ourselves, what does that say about the third house? In fact, I also want to look at some people who appear to have the moon in the third house but don't actually have the moon in the third house, to remind us that with houses you need to be flexible, and it's not necessarily always about exact house boundaries. So, for example, here is the horoscope of Nancy Pelosi. Now, technically, Nancy Pelosi has the moon in the third house because logically it's in the third house mathematically. I would not regard Nancy Pelosi's moon as being in the third house in any way, shape, or form. And that's not because of her characteristics. It's simply because, firstly, from a whole sign perspective, she has the moon definitely in the fourth house. I mean, no doubt about that. And even from a Placidus view, technically it's in the third, but it's right at the end of the third. It's almost in the fourth, and so it's less than 5 degrees from the house cusp. I think William Lilly in Christian Astrology says that if you're 5 degrees from the house cusp at the end of a house, you should kind of move it into the next house. So that's an example of why you've got to use a bit of judgment here. You don't just mathematically take a house meaning at a house placement at face value. I think that is quite an important thing. And so, looking at people that really potentially do have planets in the third house. I am sort of mainly sort of looking at the moon, but Donald Trump, for example, Donald Trump has Jupiter in the third house. Again, Placidus, technically, you might say that Jupiter, from a Placidus viewpoint, you might say, oh, Trump's got his Jupiter in the second house. Oh, that fits, he's into money. No, Trump's Jupiter is in the third house, I would say. I don't say that dogmatically, by the way, because I think with houses, you aren't dogmatic, and you don't have to be dogmatic. It's not like signs. But, he's, certainly from a whole sign perspective, he's got Leo, assuming he's got Leo rising, he certainly has Jupiter in the third house. Because Leo is the first house, Mercury is Virgo is the second house, Virgo is the second house, Libra is the third house. But from a Placidus view, technically it's in the second house in Placidus, but it's less than 5 degrees from the house cusp, and so I would regard Donald Trump's Jupiter as being in the third house. If you want to consider his obsession with money and so forth, you would look elsewhere in the horoscope, I think. And so Jupiter, although you could say, well, it's on the boundaries, so here is someone who likes to talk about money. So it's kind of perhaps where the second and the third house, where the second house is bleeding into the third house, you could say that. I mean, that may be a possibility. But Jupiter in the third house, retrograde, he's got lots to say. And I think that I would have said that Jupiter in the third house is telling us something about the third house. It's also perhaps telling us something about the problems of the third house, because the third house can be about just disconnected facts. And when we're dealing with houses, we've also always got to think about the opposite house. Where is the broad vision? There's this empty ninth house, so Jupiter is blasting away in the third house, and where is the broader vision? So that is a way of looking at it. And we do, again, someone else who has Jupiter in the third house is, or was, Joseph Goebbels. So Joseph Goebbels was the German propaganda minister while Hitler was in power. And so he clearly and unambiguously has a Jupiter in the third house, whether it's in the whole sign house system or the Placidus house system. And notice how his Jupiter is in Libra. And Jupiter in Libra, well, it's cardinal. It's in a cardinal sign. So it's in a cardinal degree. So it's opposite the Aries point. So Jupiter on the Aries point, expanding to a wider population. And Jupiter in Libra, well, it's his view of the world, or is it someone else's view of the world? With Libra, always the question is, who is balancing with who? And Libra, can be about me balancing towards someone else, or me alternatively insisting that someone else's balances to my ideas. And so Jupiter in Libra is the point, but it may just be that it's opposition the Aries point, and so it's a very powerful Jupiter. And he's also got Venus in there as well. And yeah, you might say Venus is a softer influence, but it's in Libra. But it just allows him to be an effective speaker. Now, an outsider might have regarded Goebbels as looking ridiculous, someone who wasn't German. But in a German context, this is someone who made his name as German propaganda minister. And so I think you can see how that works. And his boss also had the moon in the third, although you could say that kind of depends what house system you use. So, by the way, in the thumbnail top right, that is a little cutout of Hitler's horoscope. And so Hitler is famous for having, or infamous for having, a Moon-Jupiter conjunction. I mean, in astrology, a Moon-Jupiter conjunction, well, it's a fortunate, even though it's in Capricorn, Moon is in its detriment in Capricorn, Jupiter is fallen in Capricorn, but it's a conjunction. And so you could say that he's got Moon in the third house, and this is what he did. And Moon joys in the third house. Now, you might say, if you're into whole sign houses, you could say, oh, well, actually, it's in the fourth house because he's got Libra rising. So Libra rising, therefore Capricorn is a fourth. I think this is an example here with Hitler where this is definitely not a fourth house Moon. It's where I would definitely be using the Placidus house system, not the whole sign house system. I don't think that works there. And so yeah, I mean, he's infamous for his speeches. Like with Goebbels, Moon Jupiter. It might be pretty unpleasant in Capricorn, but it's effective. And so you have someone who is able to communicate there. And another person who is famous, well, not who is becoming famous as an effective communicator, is J.D. Vance. So here's J.D. Vance's horoscope, and J.D. Vance has the moon exactly on his third house cusp. I mean, you could say that planets, when they're actually exactly on a cusp, they become, especially powerful. And so he's got Moon fairly close, well, not close, but it's kind of It's 10 degrees from Pluto. That's a long way from Pluto. But he's got Moon and Pluto in the third house. And so this could just generally be someone who is, able to communicate in a sort of spontaneous way. Now, Moon in Libra, there is this question about what does that Moon in Libra mean. Is you can see that Moon in Libra is not necessarily about just being nice and pleasant and telling people what they want to hear. The thing about Libra is that Libra can be very disruptive. Libra understands balance, just has a natural understanding of balance, and wants everyone to be happy. My father had Moon in Libra. My father was completely into balance and just wanting to be fair. So my father had all the pleasant aspects of Moon in Libra, with dealing with his children, wanting to be fair, and that was a big part of his Moon in Libra. A big part of who he was is Moon in Libra. But Moon in Libra can work in different ways. And, Moon in Libra can be about having a particular view. Oh, and not just a Moon Libra. Libra in general can be about it. Margaret Thatcher had the Sun in Libra. You have a view of the world, and you want the world to balance to your view. And additionally, Libra can have a very good understanding of what the balance is like, where the inner harmony lies, and can also know exactly what is required to upset that inner harmony. And you could say that with J.D. Vance in terms of some of the speeches he said. So, for example, his speech at the Munich Security Conference. Here's a speech at Munich when, in fact, the Moon was in the third house when he made his speech at the Munich Security Conference, and really upset the Europeans by, as far as I'm concerned, quite justifiably attacking the Europeans for their complete contempt for free speech in Europe, and indeed contempt for the democratic process. And so so J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference, he of course absolutely understood what he needed to say to cause maximum damage. And so that could be Moon in Libra in the third house. And Emmanuel Macron, he has Moon in the third house. Well, does he have Moon in the third house? Again, Emmanuel Macron has has Capricorn rising. So you could say he's got Capricorn rising, and so in fact you could argue that he has his. And this is a case where you could argue that he has got his Moon in the fifth house, extraordinary as that sounds, but from a whole sign view. So this is an example of whole sign saying the fifth house, and the Placidus house system saying third house. Two totally different views of a house, and which one would I go for? That is a problem example. It's interesting. You can have such an issue, and he's not even born in far north latitudes. And I would have said that Moon was probably in the third house, but I would be open to. You could argue that it's in the fourth house. You could argue that it's in the fifth house. I would have said it's probably working in a third house way, and it's about someone who has strong opinions, and he is able to sort of or wants to express those opinions. And other people with the third house. Well, what about Kim Kardashian? She comes up as having a third house Moon, but of course she doesn't have a third house Moon. I would not regard Kim Kardashian as it's tempting to think that she's got a third house Moon. Moon in Pisces. You think that reality TV and the sort of the constant the trivia of reality TV. You know, that kind of fits moon in third, but she doesn't. That moon is in fact only half a degree from the fourth house cusp. So this is just a reminder. Just don't use. Don't be too mathematical about house cusps, because that is definitely a moon in the fourth house, and certainly by the whole sign house system would have that in the fourth. However, she does have the south node, I would have said, in the third house. Now you could say that technically her south node is in the second house, but it's within 5 degrees. It's a large second house, and so I would say that is within, it's within 5 degrees of the third house cusp. So I would have said that she is a south node in the third house, north node in the ninth house, and probably from a karmic view, I don't really like to use the word karma, she's kind of got really caught on the third house, because I think that, you know, what she's doing, and I mean, again, I don't know a great deal about her, but someone who has become a reality star, that's this pure third house. There's a lot of trivia here. It's third house out of control, you could say. Third house in Aquarius, just doing it her way, and what she's not really able to get, what she's perhaps been getting into, is that north node in the ninth house. That's her path forward, and that may say something about the last part of her life or her next incarnation. The north node in Leo in the ninth house is where she should be going to. Some wider perspective, you could say that she's, you know, got to think about herself, Leo, not what her fans are thinking. She's got to put herself first, and yeah, there may be some religious and spiritual side of things which she has perhaps been neglecting, and this is why with any house you've always got to consider, you know, the opposite house. And a person who I have I looked at her chart quite recently, was Rachel Ziegler. People had things to say about Rachel Ziegler. So she is this actress who was in the Snow White film, and, you know, some people would say, well, they'd never heard of her, and they're not interested. You know, but some people said they'd never heard of her. Other people had their own views, and so she has, you know. So here is the question: is what house is her moon in? Now, her moon is actually quite close to the fourth house, but it's not really close enough, and it's still, there may be a fourth house feel to that moon, and the fourth house is about really what you believe in, and there's something a little bit too personal there with that moon in the third house. And you know, the moon in the third house, certainly from a whole sign perspective, it's in the third house because she's got Cancer rising. And so being an actress, does she dance? I don't know if she dances. I assume she does. If you're an actress, you often dance, don't you? I mean, the third house is connected with dance, by the way, certainly in Vedic astrology. And so that may say something about it. But it may also say, you know, moon in the third house, it joys in the third house. Moon in Virgo, wanting to sort of get things right. And there is a relationship here. That moon the moon is actually quite strong because of its connection with Mercury. So she's got a mutual reception because Mercury is kind of exalted in Virgo, and Mercury is so moon is in Virgo's, in Mercury's exaltation, and Mercury is in the moon's exaltation, and she's got moon trine Mercury. So you can see that is a really good moon. I mean, that's the moon working really very well. It's joys in the third, so that joy in the third must have helped her in terms of, you know, becoming a successful actress at a young age, but it slipped into some other symbolism, the symbolism of the moon in the third as expressing your opinions. And of course, when you're expressing opinions, if you're a young actress, can be a problem. So she expresses her opinions and her negativity about the original story of Snow White, and that's a moon in the third, and it just once, because of that link with Mercury, it just doesn't know when to stop. Plus, its proximity to the fourth house cusp starts to give it some subjectivity. So I think, although the moon is in the third, I think that there is a bit of fourth house feel, fourth house subjectivity coming in, and that may say something about how her communication, the way she's talked to people, and her, talked about Snow White and her political views and about Trump supporters, how she has got herself into a trouble, and it just may be that it was just too close to the fourth house. It was just a bit too personal. So those are a few thoughts about the third house. I haven't really scratched the surface of it, and sorry to be a bit sort of vague and all over the place, but I sort of wanted to give it a go. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.